Yeah.
Well, that's
No pressure.
exciting. I mean, it's exciting. I'm happy.
It is.
I'm happy to have the interest.
Yeah, and I usually go to both, but I got something I've got to go do, so.
All right, we'll talk to you later. You'll be able to,
Yep.
did
And
you
let's
see it? But
You're not next week. I think I do the Good Samaritan parable next week, right? Is that right?
Here, hold on a second. Yeah, so next week is you.
Yeah, and then back to you, and then,
Back to me, and
Bill.
then, yeah.
yeah, okay, so I think we,
I'm the 12th, is that right? I'm not the 5th,
Yeah.
which is good because that's a big choir day. I am actually going to be in town. I thought I was not, but I am. But I'm glad that we shifted it the way we did because
okay,
we have two very high stakes choir pieces to do in the Sunday service on that day. There's one that's a world premiere of a...
oh, right, Ann was telling me about this.
Yep.
Yeah, it's by our neighbor,
Oh, is it? Yeah.
yeah, Laura Czar.
Laura
right?
Czar, yeah.
Actually, her mom and dad live 3 houses down, and then she's
Yeah.
just a block behind.
And we've worked it a lot. I feel like we're in a good place with it, but that the accompaniment is so counterintuitive with with just the cadences. It's very tricky, and I'm missing this coming rehearsal, the last rehearsal for it, because I'm going to be at this conference. And then in addition to that, we're singing this Mozart piece, which is like a fugue.
Hey, no, Zach.
Yeah,
Let's
from both
pile
on
it
the
up.
same day. So they're both beautiful
Yeah.
pieces, and I'm really looking forward to them both. But I'm glad I won't be trying to present and then rush to,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. Tim Warren was sitting behind me. He's got a lovely voice. I don't know if you.
we should maybe give him a nudge, huh?
I
Yeah.
nudged him a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun. I feel like I'm just now finding my feet with it. I was really concerned it would be too overwhelming to just have just adding extra meetings to the week. But it's getting to the point now where I'm like, no, actually it's just mostly good and I'm having fun with it.
Yeah. Good. When I finish this thin little intro book to Ian McGilchrist, I'll give it to you because
Oh great, yeah,
Dave
yeah.
and Sheldon they're so deep into
I
this
know,
they can't
I
get
know.
up above water and
Yeah.
communicate to anyone else about it.
You know what we say in creative services is you can't read the label from the inside of the bottle.
Right,
And that's...
exactly. But I was reading this thin little volume that he's written himself that's basically saying,
Yeah.
to read more about this, read this book.
That's great. I'd love to see his research.
It's super interesting. I mean, his
I saw the video.
he went and got, okay, the thing that jumped out at me, and I took a picture of these 2 pages and texted it to Zach. So, like other mammals and like birds, there's asymmetry to the hemispheres of our brains. And there's evidence that song preceded language in humans, which I thought was really, really
You know,
interesting.
there's
And I suppose like everything, it had a purpose to serve to help us mate.
yeah. There's a counterpart to
Warm in
that.
here anyway.
Yeah, we thought earlier this morning.
When you're training dogs and you're teaching them voice cues, I heard one trainer put it this way: they can't understand English, but they can read music. And so, if you think of your voice cue as a musical note, that you always deliver in the same way, it's easier for them to understand. And I wonder if that dovetails into some of that. You know,
I want to reread that section of his book, it's been too long. All right,
Yeah.
see you later.
Here.
Yeah.
Well, he went, right after that, I guess, he went to England.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he just came back.
Oh,
His mother's 80th birthday.
nice.
I always want there to be more chairs than there are, so that people don't feel awkward when they come in. And
Where was
door.
his mother? Where in England is she now?
It's a good question. I think it's near Manchester.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how many people we're gonna get, but if they trickle in.
I forgot to go back and
Yeah.
But I'm sure it meant a lot to her.
Yeah, and that's good. You know, go for that.
Yeah. I never think about that, but I love him so much as a son-in-law. And the fact that, that he's got a family that are missing him all the time.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yeah. Is his his father.
That song that you sang,
Like,
is that song that
You-
you
you
sang,
came
is that
first,
a
did you?
is that a traditional
really?
melody?
After
It is.
time.
Oh, really? No, interesting,
And
yeah.
I
Because
think
it's
he
just
Church of
a
England.
haunting
Yeah.
melody for me.
Uh-huh.
I think he,
I'm trying to remember, if
Uh-huh.
is that the one that goes with that song, The Water
Simon's
is
not far
Wide?
from retirement.
Water is wide, but I
Oh,
can
really?
cross over.
Retired
And if it's not that, I think it's
You know
something
Renata?
maybe that
Yeah, we've met before.
Yes.
Pete Seeger still sang. But
I
I'll look
know
it up.
Maria long
Yeah.
before.
Is that
I
song in
joined
the
here.
hymnals?
Oh, really?
And then, oh.
There'll be a note
I
about the
don't
melody.
know that.
I see the arranger, so I'll look it up.
Yeah.
Oh.
And there's a note about the melody.
Yeah.
I'm from the Catholic Church.
Just tears me up every time I hear it.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah.
It's a good song.
Yeah, one time when I said, oh, I
Um,
found my place, Maria, I
So,
said, the mass is
now
the
playing it
same.
on my
And she
ukulele,
said,
that's
Oh,
not
yeah.
really.
something to do.
Well,
Yeah, no.
No, I
yeah,
really
it
like
depends
it.
upon your point of view.
Yes, yes.
What things you might miss.
Well,
But you know, there's
Yeah, when I
this
decided
couple of
not to
melodies
stay
like in the
with,
hymnal that,
you know, I still
you know, show
consider
up in 3 or
myself
4
a
different hymns,
Catholic.
you know, the different.
But
hymns and
it's
stuff
what
like that.
went on within the
And,
institution that I just couldn't be
That beat
with.
out of my vision
So,
always
yeah.
kills me
And, but
because
then I
Van Morrison
really
does a pretty
miss
good
going
version
to
of it.
mass.
Oh.
So, I was invited by 3 different people to join us here. But there are so many ways of getting in. Twice I didn't meet the person who was going to be, and I went home. And the 3rd time I thought, no, now I really go in.
yeah.
And
Oh.
Simon was giving the sermon, and I thought,
I
that's
feel like I
right.
should know where those teachers
Yeah,
are.
good. Yeah.
Steve,
Yeah.
no, I don't think I knew that. There are a couple of people who study anthropology of the church, it's kind of
Of course,
funny.
there's a lot of places
I feel like we are,
Yeah.
very
just
similar to
a
that.
very educated and curious
Simon
group of
really
people,
gives
you
it
know.
a homily.
Yeah,
It's gotten
there's a
really
lot
good.
of learning.
And then I realized, yeah, you probably always did good, I just wasn't coming here. I may have missed a whole lot.
Yeah.
Well,
I really
when
like
do
it.
these
You know
typically
where
start? Do they
Thanksgiving
start right on the
dinner he
nose or a
wasn't
few minutes
giving us
after?
good
I feel like there's
homily.
probably something gonna trickle in a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Shall we
He
wait
really
till
does.
5 after?
well, I like his attitude.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Sometimes they wait a few minutes.
Silence is consent.
Oh, yeah.
Silence is what?
Consent,
think
or assent.
Silence,
whatever.
okay, silence is assent,
I would
yes.
think that
yes.
Craig is coming.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
Glenn's gonna
Let's see.
come in, but
Let's
he's
hear
not
it
here
every
yet.
morning.
Was there something?
Yeah, then
Yeah, I
they
suppose
do
so.
it in between the 2 services too.
Oh, really?
I know Gail wanted to come, but
Oh,
she's
okay.
gotta go to
So
the
the
store.
teacher
Yes.
has to say the
Oh,
same
okay,
thing.
well,
Yes.
Standard, you know,
Yes.
in other words, don't wait.
Okay, well, I know Glenn's coming, I'm gonna text him.
Yeah. Well, you know what you want to cover.
Michelle's gonna
You
come,
don't
but
want to
she's
run short.
Yeah,
checking something out with the altar guild or something.
yeah. Well,
Yeah, I almost went to the Elder Guild meeting, but they said, no, I think you wanna
Oh. Did they get the,
go. I think it's the one down on the left there, right?
oh.
Yeah. I'm not sure. There's some meeting going on now.
do we wanna do names? I know there are a couple people I don't know names for. I'm Elisabeth. Do we wanna just go around the circle? I'm Elisabeth and
I'm Renate.
Say again?
Renate.
Renata, yes, yes. Uh-huh.
I'm Marie.
Marie,
Andrew.
Andrew,
Rick?
Rick,
John.
John,
Steve.
Steve,
Shonda.
Shonda. Okay, let me try this in reverse order. Shonda, Steve, John, Rick, Andrew, Marie, and Renata.
Yes.
Okay, woo. And then Elisabeth.
Dad.
Remember myself
Yeah,
too.
impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it's short-term memory though, I doubt any of it'll stick.
Uh-oh.
We have another, Bill.
Hey.
Bill I know. We just did names around the circle.
Oh.
Beautiful sweater.
Hmm?
Beautiful sweater.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
We were just wondering if we should start right on the hour or wait for a few minutes to trickle in.
I think most people are made their way,
Yeah.
so.
I know Glenn will come, but he can miss the beginning, I suppose. Not punctual, you don't get the beginning.
Yeah, he was chatting in the church,
Gave
so.
you a rave review.
Glenn did? Oh, the morning?
Craig.
Oh, Craig did, yeah. Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Well, I hope I live up to your expectations in that case. Okay, so this is a talk about faith practice and place relationship. Place has been important to me for, as I think about it, it's been important to me all my life. I moved away from my childhood home when I was 11 and kind of never got over it. I still, feel a pull to that place, which is on the other side of the country, on the East Coast, which I know I will never live in again. And that has given me the need to try to figure out what does it mean to be in a place where you don't feel ultimately at home, how do you create relationships with that? And so it's been a personal question for a long time, and then it also was a big part of my master's program. I studied place relationship as part of my studies in anthropology and history. So today we're just going to explore some of the overlaps between faith and place. So I want to start with an imagination game. You can see some photos here of places you probably recognize. I mean, vineyards generally, right? This is wine country. And then we have the top of Mary's Peak. We have Mary's River feeding into the Willamette. When you think about your five senses, things you can taste, touch, smell, hear, it's the last one. I can never remember them all five. See. I forgot that one this morning too. Why is that one the one I forget? What comes to mind? Have you been in these places, or in the places you've been around Corvallis? What senses come to mind? It's an actual question, not a rhetorical question. Something from the senses.
The minute I looked at that entrance of the Marys, I remember sitting in a kayak and going, but I couldn't figure out where it was.
Yeah.
I saw it and I know I've been there.
So you probably remember the water bubbling up against the edge of the kayak
And then getting the nose out in the stream was a little faster and I thought I'm going,
yeah,
yeah.
had a little moment of panic. I think of things like birdsong in the backyard. I think about, I've never actually seen the wildflowers on Mary's Peak during wildflower time, but I have seen it like this. Yeah. That damp smell, that damp feeling in the air down by the waterfront, when they have the sprinklers on, or when you're kind of close to where the shady trees are over the Willamette. Now, what comes to mind when you think of, what do you think Mount Sinai smells like? What do you think, when Samson took the honey out of the lion carcass and ate the honey, what kind of local flavors do you think he tasted? What do you think the air around the River Jordan feels like? I don't know if anybody here has taken a Holy Land trip. Some have, yeah? I have not, so I've never been there personally. Yeah.
Really
River's
cold.
cold, yeah.
There are very little waters left in there. Go to the Dead Sea
Yeah.
or taken out there for
Yeah, I imagine it's pretty different. It's a very different climate. It's a very different part of the world. And this is kind of the point that I want to raise, is that we don't live in biblical lands, right? We live here in the Willamette Valley. And so the stories that are all the way through our Bible, our scripture, they originated half a world away. And they reference a different climate, a different ecology, a different set of flora and fauna, a different culture. And it's essentially a different world. And so a lot of our everyday experiences here, living in Corvallis or in the Willamette Valley, they just don't really line up with what we read in the Bible, because the Bible doesn't, those stories don't come from here, right? They're just they're not tied specifically to this region where we live. And why does that matter? What I see in that, what I've been kind of riddling and trying to puzzle out for myself over the last number of years, is that the references in the Bible, the place references, are, for us, they're metaphors. To cross the River Jordan is, to pass into the afterlife. It has this, it's very meaningful, it's significant, but it's a metaphor. It's not actually a lived experience, at least an everyday lived experience. But to the writers of the Bible, those experiences were not metaphors. They were reality. They were places, the same as we could say the waterfront or Mary's Peak. They were places that they knew. And as an English student, a lifelong English student, I will say I have nothing against metaphors. I think metaphors are powerful and beautiful and essential. But if our religious experience remains confined to metaphor, if it's nothing more than metaphor, then I think we're missing out. What happens is that our religious references are sort of limited and confined to this sort of heady, abstract space where mostly they're imagined. You know, when we think about the biblical story, we're sort of seeing stories in our imagination. We're not necessarily seeing them embodied in the land around us or embodied in the place around us. And, you know, as humans, we have a lot of different faculties for experiencing the world. We have hearts and minds and bodies and souls and spirits, and however you want to categorize the human experience. There's all these different dimensions to it. And when your faith is able to inhabit your lived experience in an embodied way, it has more dimension than if it's not able to do that, right? And so, you know, for the biblical writers, these images were familiar on a sensory level. The place was connected to their faith and embodied. The land itself was a sacred geography. It was part of the sacred story, right? Now, my question for today is, what would it look like for this land right here to be inextricable from our faith practice, our experience of our traditions? Personally, I think that's a game changer. I want to point to the etymology of the word human. It's connected to the same root as we get humus, soil. This is from the Proto-Indo-European word digomen, if I'm saying that right, which literally means earthling or earthly being. There's a counterpart, you know, you can compare the Hebrew word Adam, you know, it means of the ground, from the ground. So there's this sort of intuited understanding in our culture that to be human is to be connected to ground, to be from ground. And I will say again, not in an abstract and metaphorical way, but in a specific way, in an immediate way. So I'm just going to kind of slide it out onto the table here. I don't generally have any interest in telling people what to do or how to think, but I'm just going to put out there for your consideration that maybe if we aren't connecting faith to land, if we're keeping those things compartmentalized, are we fully practicing? Are we, if it's not inhabiting every dimension of our experience on this earth as humans, is there more to be found? I would say there is. I'd say that when we connect faith to land, we have the opportunity to experience more responsibility, more creativity, and more depth. So I'll give you a little example. I actually have a little prop to share around the room here. You can take a look and pass it down. This is the Carmina Gadelica. This is a compendium of hymns, poems, incantations, songs, folklore. It's essentially, I think of it as essentially a book of common prayer that is specifically connected to the Highlands of Scotland. It was collected by Alexander Carmichael between 1860 and 1909 from people living there. And these people, this was a very Christianized place. Christianity had come to this place, and people had knit their practices, their existing land relationship together with the Christianity that they were received, that they then, you know, took on and made their own. And so this text, if you will call it a book of common prayer, this book of common prayer is not centered in Jerusalem. It's centered in Scotland. And you can see that woven through the text of this book, right? Instead of the cedars of Lebanon, we have the red rowan. Instead of the desert wilderness, we have the moors, you know? There are swans, there are local animals, there are local plants, there are experiences that people had in their everyday lives, and they've really beautifully sort of woven their Christianity into their local immediate place relationship. Now, I've lived in various parts of the U.S., and I've gone to church with at a lot of different kinds of churches, And there are lots of churches that I know would hear what would look at the Carmina Gadelica and would say, "Oh, that's paganism. That's heresy. That's trying to blend, water down Christianity and blend it in with paganism." And I'm not really concerned about that. I'm just going to say, if that's a concern that you have, I'm not really worried about that. I think that in Christianity takes different shapes in every part of the world it travels to. In the same way as you see a cuisine change and develop new flavors kind of in each place that it goes, the same thing happens with faith. The same thing happens with language. I think God is the God of the whole world and would, of course, express themselves to people in one place and time and culture in a way that was relevant to those folks, right? And so call it ecumenical rather than whatever else you might, heresy, I guess. But what I love about it is that it does combine place and faith. And I will say too, it's tricky for us in the United States here because our society really expects placelessness. It expects us to treat place as an interchangeable part. Okay, so when your kid grows up and goes to college, they're probably going to move hundreds, maybe thousands of miles away. If you get a great job opportunity in some other city, you might move hundreds or thousands of miles away. So we kind of, we I think as humans develop connections to the places in which we live, but we also live in a society that doesn't really support those connections and doesn't really have a category for thinking seriously about them. It's kind of the assumption is that that's fine while you're here, and then if you have to toss it, you toss it, right? There are any number of ways to explore this question of how do we connect faith to place, and I'm sure we all have lots of experiences and so on that we could draw from in this. I'm going to walk us through a few and sort of provide an easy little kind of like two-step process that we can use to try to explore this in an ongoing way, right? So there's basically two steps. And it's the first step is to look around and notice what's here. What is specifically here? What is this land? What are the animals that live here? What are the plants? What's the geology of this place? What's the weather like? To look around and notice and find out, learn, research, understand. And then to look for ways, maybe creatively, to connect those things to faith practice, to the traditions that we have that we've inherited and that we love. And so I'm going to go through the rest of our talk. Oh, it's good. We've done about 15 minutes, and we're just through the intro. The rest of our talk, we're going to be just exploring a couple of different ways of what this might look like, right? So the first is to look at climate, seasons, weather, okay? Here in the Willamette Valley, if you look at weather charts for what's common year to year, of course this is changing with climate change, but what our baseline is basically we have pretty intense heat from June to September is kind of our warm time. With the hottest days in August, we all know this. That's when the box fans get sold out at the Walmart and the Fred Meyer. We know that it's cold from mid-November to March. The coldest month is January. Okay, so our cold and our let me say it rains on and off from mid-October to mid-April. So our cold and our rain are not exactly aligned, but they're overlapping. Our rainiest day, according to the data that I was looking at, it pegged it for November. I don't think that's true. Experientially, I feel like it's rainiest in March, maybe. That's when we have the really long soaking day after day of rain. But that's what the chart said. It said that snow is most likely in February of all months, and that in terms of the skies, we have our clearest skies in July and our cloudiest sky on January 16th. That's the day for clouds, apparently. So what we have is this long period of cold, this intense, pretty hot period in the summer, and then we have somewhat narrow window on either side of really perfect comfort, just beautiful, cool, warm fall, spring days. And we have lots of rain. So having kind of walked through that, let's think about what does that look like for the Christian year, and what can that look like for our informing our faith practice, right? So I want to talk about Epiphany to start with. Epiphany is the time of year when we think about the moments that Christ's divinity was revealed. Okay, so he is a person, he is in the flesh, but oh my gosh, he's also God, right? And so the stories that sort of accompany Epiphany are the journey of the Magi, the baptism of Jesus, the Spirit descended upon him, the wedding at Cana when he changed water to wine. These are the moments where this just kind of shone through, right? Epiphany lasts from January 6th all the way through to Lent, which, as we've just noted, in our time, part of the world is a time of cold, potentially snow, lots of rain, lots of cloud. This dovetails really well with the story of Epiphany because this is about light coming to the darkness, Jesus' divinity being revealed from the darkness. So, to the world, God came in the flesh. To the dark, light came. To the cold, warmth came. It's a time when it makes a lot of sense to lean into those contrasts, to create those contrasts by making warmth and light, finding ways to make warmth and light in your life. So things like new beginnings and reunions and celebrations make a lot of sense during Epiphany. I like to think it's a time when dim mornings like this aren't just seasonal, but sacred. They're telling a story. They're telling a rich story that has significance and meaning for our faith practice. That, when you look out the window and you see the lamplight shining in the glass and you see that juxtaposed against the cold and the snow and the dark, that is telling you the truth about Christ, about the world we live in. And it's visible out our window. It's something that can be sensed and seen and felt. So my next part of the Christian year is looking at Lent. This photograph it's another photograph that I took out my window, and you can't see the movement that, of course, the photograph doesn't capture. But these trees were just being shaken with rain and wind. It was just a phenomenal, it almost looks like a black and white photo, but it's not, obviously. And yeah, it's this is like the time of Lent, right? Lent is a time of prayer, of preparation, of fasting and waiting. In our region, it's a time of long rain. It's also the hungry gap. So if you are familiar with this concept from agriculture or subsistence farming, you have lots of abundance over the summer, especially the fall. You have a really full, beautiful pantry, and then the pantry starts to run bare. And there's not as much to eat. And you are hungry, and you're starting new plants. You're getting ready to grow the next year's food and sustenance. But you're hungry, and there's a lot of waiting that goes on. There's a lot of kind of dull, like one color kind of foods. Eat a lot of Jerusalem artichoke, maybe. That's not my favorite food. So it's a time of hunger. It's a time of fasting. This is what we do during Lent, is we fast, right? Lent is also, it means lengthening. That's the etymology of the word. Lent is when the day is lengthening. Light is lengthening. This is also a time of promise. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. You have the crocus to tell you that. You have the crocus to show its head and presage Easter. This is all leading towards something that's full of promise, right? So the story of the world outside of your window during Lent tells you the story of your faith.
That's only true for the Northern Hemisphere.
Yes, and that's exactly my point, is all of these things that I'm talking about today are really rooted in the Willamette Valley specifically, because anywhere else it would, some climates are very similar. Lots of climates have 4 seasons, or they might have a long rainy period in the spring, but not all climates. This isn't necessarily portable. What you would need to do if you lived in a part of the world that had a different system is you would have to look at that system and try to search for, well, what meaning is that telling? And it would be, the answers would be 10 years old. It can be over 200 feet tall. The name Suga comes from a Japanese word for mother, and this is what's called the mother tree, the mother stump. This tree has died. It is very clearly cut down, right? It is a stump. And from that stump, those are hemlock trees. Those are the future 9-footers, right? Like getting ready, springing up. And that's the magic of the hemlock trees. It's constantly resurrecting. So here we have in our forests, if you walk out into the forest and you see this, you see a living expression of the resurrection right here in our own forests. This is a living testament to the death and life of Jesus that's visible and touchable, smellable, tasteable if you want to taste it. It's experiential to our senses, right, in a sensory way. The last example I'll give from the Christian year is ordinary time. Now, when I first heard about ordinary time, I thought it was a big nothing, right? Like ordinary time, oh, so that's the period where nothing's happening, there's no parties, there's no like meaningful Christian story that's associated to each month. It's like, where's the fun in that, you know? But ordinary time, I've come to think of very differently since learning more about it. So it stretches from the day after Pentecost to the day before Advent. And by ordinary it means there's no big feasts here, no major feasts. But it also can be understood as working out the resurrection in your daily life. Now, in what way can you work out the resurrection in your daily life in your backyard? You can take seeds which have died and you can bury them in the tomb of the ground. And you can work to keep them weeded and watered and see them resurrect, see them come to life, right? Ordinary time is a time of showing up, doing the small daily efforts that are so much a part of the Christian life. Living, go out like the blessing that sends us out into the world after church each Sunday. Go out and do this. Like live this. Let this be part of your life. And I think ordinary time is all about that. The other thing that's cool about ordinary time is liturgically the color is green. Well, in Christmas, we have the colors of white and gold. And in the Willamette Valley, what you find is that early summer, it's so green. The emerald green, if you drive down 99 and you see all those farms and fields, and they're just, that grass is just it's brighter than bright. It's just so green. And then, you get a few months in, July, August, and the fields have turned to gold. And so we have this transition written into the ecology that we live within that's shifting from green to gold through ordinary time. Shifting us from ordinary time into the Christmas season, right? So these things are all sort of they're all sort of there to be found, right? And then these are just things that I've found. I'm sure that if you gave it some thought, you could find plenty of other things, other ways that faith testifies in the land around us. We've talked about weather and seasons. Another place to look is to our living neighbors, our plant and animal neighbors that live around us. In the Bible, well, let me backtrack. So in any ecosystem, you have what's called keystone species. These species, we have osprey, we have big leaf maple, we have Pacific salmon on the screen right now. These are icons of our region, right? These are like things we sort of know about and celebrate. Salmon, it's on so many signs and in so many stories and so these things are sort of iconic, but they're more than iconic. Ecologically, they're called keystone species. And what that means is they're species that they have an outsized role in helping the ecology function the way that it functions, right? So they have they play a huge role to keeping the ecology sort of stable and productive and abundant and just sort of rolling along. I would say if we're connecting, if we're using ecological terms, we can say keystone species. If we're using terms sort of connecting this to faith, we can go ahead and say sacred. I think we can say these are sacred species. And I think that if you, this is affirmed in, if you look at the native peoples who are indigenous to this place, you'll find that they're going to be holding these species with high regard as sacred, as relatives, as very important relatives who have a sacred role to play. They are literally co-creating the land around us, these species are. We are co-creators with Christ, helping to, work out the kingdom of God here on earth. These species are co-creating the land. They're helping to do this in an embodied way, and that's important. So, I would suggest if you're sort of looking for ways to connect faith to land, one of the things you can do is look at the keystone species, learn about them, find out about them. And I'm gonna, as a case in point, I'm gonna walk us through with a particular keystone species. We'll see if you can guess. So, kind of coming back to this idea, in the Bible, when we read the Bible, we are sort of being transported to this world of desert pastoralism. It's a Mediterranean world, and some, depending on which book you're reading, but there's a lot of desert pastoralism, and the flora and fauna are different. The culture is different. The interactions that they have with land is different, right? So Psalm 23 is a beautiful psalm. I love it dearly. But it's also sort of referencing a kind of interaction with the natural world that we don't really identify with. Some of us have sheep, it's true. But we're not leading our sheep from one part of a mountain to another, looking for water, searching for food for them, slingshotting lions or bears or whatever. Like that's not how we do sheep, if we are doing sheep. And most of us aren't doing sheep to start with. But what we do have as a next door neighbor is the beaver. And they're another keystone species. They're called an ecological engineer. They have a huge role in the ecology, which we'll explore. I invite you to imagine with me what Psalm 23 would look like if instead of speaking about the relationship of shepherd to sheep, we were talking about the relationship of beaver to forest or beaver to surrounding communities. So I didn't go ahead and rewrite the Bible here for you all, but I'll invite you to imagine what that might look like. The first point, of course, is habitat. Beavers in their activities, they create a tremendous amount of habitat for other species around. Obviously, they create green pastures, they create still waters. This is what they do in the world. They fell trees, big surprise. This is a spoiler alert. And they fell the trees in the paths of creeks and rivers. They build these dams. The water builds up, it creates a deep pool. And then it spills over and it floods the whole area. And that's the point, the beavers like that. And the water spilling over and watering, irrigating this whole wide area, what that does is it nourishes plants which grow up and create shade and create this sort of like restorative, beautiful spaces, right? This like leafy sort of paradise, and beavers bring that to be. So when we talk about restoring soul and body, beavers have a role to play there, right? They're also vigilant. Beavers, the reason they build dams is because they don't want to cotton with predators, and they like to build deep waters to protect their own lodge, right? So they're taking care of themselves in that regard. But they also perform a function of vigilance for the surrounding animals as well. If a beaver hears you coming and doesn't like the look of you, they'll slap the water with their tail. And everyone will know. Everyone will know right away that there's trouble in the neighborhood and they better watch out. So this kind of guardian role, I want to connect this again to the etymology of the word Lord. The word Lord means guard. It comes from the Proto-Indo-European word for guard, and it kind of sounds the same if you sort of mumble like guard, It's like you can feel it. And I love that because whenever I think of that word Lord that we use so often in church, there's kind of a sort of what I find to be a little bit alienating of like, you know, this kind of structure and hierarchy of like, oh Lord, you know, this sort of like obeisance and like, you know, like power and majesty and all that stuff. I've never really connected personally with those. If you do, that's great, but for me, I never really have. But when I found out the etymology of that word, I thought, there it is, that's it. That's the Lord is my shepherd. That's the one who is watching over, who is guarding, who is planning ahead, who is guiding, right? And the beavers do have a guardian role to play here. Yeah, so I'll do one more here. Provision. Beavers it play an enormous role in creating abundance, and you know I've talked about a bit of that with the sort of irrigating the land and sort of allowing these plants to grow up. They also create waterlogged soils, which are anaerobic. It changes the soil chemistry, so they're not processing. They no longer have the bacteria that thrive in oxygen environments. They have the bacteria that thrive in non-oxygen environments. And that waterlogged anaerobic soil down there at the bottom of the beaver wetland is an incredible locus for long-term carbon sequestration. They're pulling carbon out of the air, they're locking it up in the ground, they're making it available in the ground to the plants that want to grow from it. And essentially what they're doing is they're creating this complex patchwork of environments that are just brimming with life, that are supporting all of these other living things, which would not have existed without their involvement, right? They've come in and done that. So, you know, tying it back around, we don't share that pastoral culture with the biblical writers, but we do have beavers here. They're there to be seen, and so we can sort of allow them to testify to us. We can invite these stories of provision and protection into our religious imagery. Like, what do we think of when we think of God's provision and protection? Could we not think about the role that beavers play or the role that other species play in doing those things? And I'll add to this as a parting thought on the beavers before we proceed. One of the things I really love and respect about the Episcopal Church is the altar guild, is this group of people who come to care for the holy appointments, and they know all about them, and they know how to polish the candlesticks. Like, I'm not Episcopal from childhood. I don't even know the right word to use half of the time, but I see that there is a depth of knowledge and care and reverence that goes into caring for these holy appointments that we see show up in our services. You know, the holy scripture and the candles and the torches and all of these things. And when I say, what if we were to treat these keystone species as sacred, what I mean is that kind of seriousness, that kind of care and reverence. Not just like, yeah, beavers are cool, they play an important role, or like, oh yes, beavers are ecologically very important, we must, you know, be conservationists to like protect their life in this world. But like, what if even on a layer deeper, all of that's great, but like, what if even on a layer deeper, we recognize them as sacred. We recognize them as playing an important role in God's world that we should take responsibility to care for, in the same way as Altar Guild takes such beautiful responsibility to care for our holy appointments here at church. Now, we've talked about weather, we've talked about flora and fauna. There's so much more we could talk about. We won't talk about it all today, but I'm just gonna, while I can, I'm just gonna slide this across the table. What about geology? My Lord, the Coast Range is a line of mountains here by the coast, and then of course we have the Cascades further east. We live in the rain shadow of these mountains. So what happens is you have all of these weather systems, all of this rain and wind from the ocean that's so rich and nourishing, and it comes in and it blasts the coast, and all the trees over there are just like they got no leaves on them because they've been blasted by wind and salt air and all this, and then you know. The air rises above the coast and it rains out some of what it has to give. And then the rest of this air comes and moves across the Willamette Valley. And because we've got this giant wall of Cascades on the other side of us, it stays with us. That air tries to move up over the Cascades, and by the time it's gotten to the top, it's rained itself out. So what we have is, here in the Willamette Valley, we have the encircling arms of the Coast Range and the Cascades, giving us a dwelling place in between, giving us a beautiful place of refuge that is temperate, that is green, that is abundant, that is beautiful. This is one of my favorite passages from Scripture. The eternal God is your dwelling place, and underneath are the everlasting arms. Can we see God in the geology of our land? Can we see God's witness, God's face in these mountains, God's arms in these mountains? So I don't want to dwell too much on geology, but let's see. Yeah, I guess I'll bring it back to this notion that in some churches that I've been a part of, all of this would be understood as hopelessly pagan. How how dare you connect God? I mean, heathen literally means of the heath, right? How dare you connect your faith to the hills where the heath grows? But here in the Episcopal Church, we have beloved saints, which again would not be cool in some of the churches I've been part of. Very sola scriptura crowd, not into all of that beauty and sensory input. No incense for us, thank you very much. Incense for me, I love incense. But in the Episcopal Church, we have beloved saints like St. Francis. And St. Francis was way ahead of me. So I'm giving this presentation, St. Francis is miles ahead. And we know the prayer of St. Francis. This is the Canticle of the Creatures. This is my version of the Canticle of the Creatures. He wrote it in 1224 in Umbrian Italian. He wrote this long, very long poem. And what I did is I wanted to be able to sing this poem and to say it to myself as I moved through the world. And so I took a translation, a literal translation of his thing, and I adapted it into a series of stanzas, some of which are shown here. And as you can see, St. Francis is saying, be praised, O God. St. Francis is not, I think the criticism that I would have heard from other faith communities I've been a part of is that, it's idolatry or it's, whatever. But St. Francis is saying, no, it's God we're praising, right? Mm-hmm. But look at these living elements that exist in our landscape. And for St. Francis, the sun was brother sun, the moon was sister moon, the earth is mother earth. Brothers, wind and air, sister water, brother fire. There are interactions to be had, there are conversations to be had, there is a way to interact with and honor these elements of creation in a personal way, in a meaningful, relational way. And so, I feel like we have permission to to venture into that territory. The thought I'll leave you with is that God expressed themselves in a particular way, in a particular time, to a particular people. And out of that expression, out of that interaction, we have our scriptures and the origin of our faith. But we're not that people. We don't live in that place. We don't share that culture ourselves. And we don't have to settle for kind of closing our eyes and reaching halfway around the world to a different language, a different time, a different way of existing in the world. We can also, it's wonderful to learn about those things, I think we should, but we can also find the shapes and expressions, the voice of God in our environment today that's immediate, that's not heady, it's not abstract, it's not a metaphor, it's here, it's in the senses, it's embodied. And when we do that, we invite our faith to inhabit multiple dimensions of our human experience, not just what's here, or maybe what's here, but also where we exist, where we're sitting, what we feel, what we sense. And I think that doing that it gives us a richer experience, but it also equips us to be better stewards of this land. It, like I said at the outset, it gives us more responsibility, more creativity, more depth. And you know, these things aren't done in a day. This is a relationship. This is something that is worked out like ordinary time. We work it out each day, and how we think about things and how we interact with things around us. And so, essentially the thought I want to leave you with is just an invitation to explore this and to get started.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, I have a thing that I hope is connected. I mean, you were talking about the seasons and the waiting and all that. Supposedly Christmas, there are some people who say, oh, it was Saturnalia, it was this and that.
Yeah.
Although if you read into people like Religion for Breakfast and PhDs, probably not. What it probably was, though, related to was John the Baptist. So John the Baptist says, he must increase and I must decrease. And the feast day for John the Baptist is a couple of days after the summer solstice, June 24th, when the sun is decreasing. And the feast of Christmas is precisely when it is increasing.
Yeah, and to dovetail that, it's funny. I never know how well this will fly, because, like I said, there are some people who would be like horribly offended by even the thought. But I think it's rich and interesting. That dovetails actually with the pagan practice of summer solstice and winter solstice, Oak King and Holly King. Holly King is born on the summer solstice and then slowly rises to his prominence at the winter solstice, at which point he is slain and Oak King is born and begins to rise. And it, there are these different sort of religious, it's a vocabulary, right? There are these different ways to express this pattern that I think we're perceiving in the world, which is here at the height of summer, there is the seed of decline. It's kind of baked into that. Here at the height of winter, there's this spark of light that's baked into that. And connecting it with Christ I think is wonderful.
The very earliest missionaries, and about 1800 years later, the very latest missionaries, both saw people's beliefs and legends and things and said, you are prefiguring all this.
Yeah.
God has given you wisdom and an understanding, and this is like how it all fits in.
Right, and there's that notion about, what is it? I can't remember the noun. It's revealed and natural. Revealed, something revelation. There's like natural revelation and I'm rusty on my theology, but there's like the kind of revelation that exists in the world that is always speaking to you, and then there is what is divinely revealed through Scripture, and that these things are not at odds with each other. They are complementary to one another. What did you want to say?
I come from Germany.
Yeah.
The northern part of Bavaria that is different from the rest of Germany. But the Christmas tree comes from Germany because it goes back to the Germanic or Germanic tribes who use green bows at a time where there was nothing else green as, begging for the sun god to come back. And the early missionaries, I think, Christmas comes in much later than Easter, looking back, was, I think the early missionaries were carrying mothers, not, they probably were men, but in a way of, you already have a holiday, but let's give it a new meaning.
Right.
And so, like even the bakery goods, that goes back to when actual animals were sacrificed. So let's not kill animals, but let's bake, something that would, even the word alive, So there are many holidays that take a pagan practice and gave it new meaning. Like for Epiphany, I come from a town, it wasn't quite practiced there, but You just go on your day hikes, and there are the old farmhouses where they have 1943, let's say, 1943, and in between is Caspar, Melchior, and Balthasar, with a little cross in between. So it was not looking in the nature for what could express, but carrying those Christian symbols out into the nature.
Yeah.
You know, like in Easter, Palm Sunday, I should say. Germany doesn't have palms. So we use the pussy willows, and they would be in farm communities, would be carried out and put on the four corners of, so they carried, they didn't look in nature what could express, as you showed there.
Yeah.
They carried it out.
That's right, yeah.
You know, every small hill or big mountain in the Alps has a crucifix on top.
Yeah.
You know, a cross, I should say. There's no Jesus, no body on it. But ein Gipfelkreuz, that's the top, you know, within smaller communities. If they had, you know, the village hill, there would even be stations of the cross going up. So it's carried into the nature.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think it has that kind of flow. And I think part of why I am not really worried about paganism essentially is that I see it as a lot of these are, we could put it differently to say, like, these are the indigenous faith practices of the people of different places, and I have a lot of respect for that. And they're also reflecting land relationships that go way back. So I think there's a lot of wisdom to be found in these older practices. I think they're beautiful and valuable. And the ones that have chosen to receive Christianity, or you know, Christianity of course has a fraught history and how it went about and put itself everywhere. But to the places where it took root, I think that it's really rich that they are woven together. That one didn't replace the other. That they are woven.
If we really, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
If we really think that God created humanity, then God's leaving traces of God's own self all over the place. And I really don't see too much problem with saying, okay, that's kind of how God spoke to this community and this culture. And you're right, there are things we can learn about worship and holiness and respect from the way God revealed God's self to a different community.
One thing that I've been interested in for several years is quantum physics. And when you read how the theories have been changing through time, especially in the 20th century and up till now, and the things that the scientists keep discovering, revealing kind of understanding about how matter came to be and what it is. And then I think, I'm going to jump to the very beginning of the Christian Bible, where it says, in the beginning there was God. It doesn't say in the beginning there was God and everything else. It says in the beginning there was God. Everything came from that. And that's what I believe. So it's not hard for me to believe that somehow God is infused in this plastic table.
Oh, yeah. I think the technical word is panentheism. It's not pantheism, but it's God. God is all and in all. You know, Andrew, you had a
What was the word, how did you use that word?
panentheism.
Panentheism. I've never heard that. I love this. This is, to me, this whole concept, the theme that you're presenting, just blows my mind. I think it's really radical, because, sort of experientially radical, because what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing is, okay, we sit there and we listen to the readings, and they are coming from a certain place, and from obviously certain cultures, and we try to sort of twist our mind into getting the truth out of that particular location and culture, and what the, you know, what the poetry, what that particular whatever version of literature comes to us, and then we never take, what blows my mind is then, okay, as we do that, take another step and put it into our, not just, we try to apply it to our little lives, right? But apply it to our lives with these other new stories. I mean, who would have found a sheep for a beaver? I mean, right? I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It is really cool to reimagine. She's inviting us to reimagine our theology from our own sense of place. And I think that is just like, it's a whole new chapter, a whole new way of I mean, it's sort of scary, it's sort of like weird. We spend our whole lives doing something, and this is such to me, I'm just hardly even being able to grasp what she's saying here, but how to take that and put it into not only our lives, but I tell my wife, I love dirt. I just love dirt. I love the where we are and what that dirt is and where it came from and all that stuff. And to imagine that this valley, that we're encircled by these mountains and all that, I mean, it's just blowing my mind. So I just think this is so neat to be able to put our faith into the place where we put our feet down and what we see and the seasons as they change and all that. So I really love this.
Thank you, Andrea. That's
You're officially
high
cool.
praise. Yeah, I remember, years ago when we were living in Portland, I was trying to sort of poking at this idea from a different, from wherever I was at that time, and I kept coming back to this notion of Mount Tabor because I really loved Mount Tabor. I lived near it, and it was a special place, and I kept returning to it, and I was thinking, why don't we have holy places here? Like, why do we have to imagine all of our holy places? Like, yeah, we've got Mount Sinai and Moses and God in the cleft of the rock, and like these are amazing stories that I love. But also, like, what would it look like if Mount Tabor were as holy as that? And that, I don't have like a whole schema worked out or anything. I think I present it as a process, a question to quest after, right? To work out and explore. But it does seem like an important question to me.
Mount Tabor is definitely sacred, just so you know.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is some of these places around us that are sort of invisible to us, we might be missing the ways in which they are sacred that we just don't know about,
It has a crater on top.
Yeah.
For the native people, there were many.
Yeah, that's right.
sacred places.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, great.
Yeah.
And we finished basically on time, so I'm
Hey.
feeling successful.
Yay.
Thank you for coming, everybody. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have you ever seen the research that's been done on how the forest gets fed by the salmon?
No, I bet it's pretty intense.
It turns out that all those
Having trouble
I
areas
can
where the
remember
salmon
something.
spawn
First little,
and then of course die.
Yeah,
There are a lot of birds that
yeah.
and bears
Oh, thank you so much.
and various other animals.
Yeah.
We grab those carcasses and drag them out into the forest.
Oh, yeah.
Very
So they're
good.
fertilizing.
When there's really prolific amounts,
reading
that we don't really have right now.
Yeah.
There are prolific
Oh,
amounts.
they're not, so we're just going over there, okay.
The entire
I'm gonna
forest
take my
got covered
cup.
with salmon carcasses.
Yeah.
And there's a fellow over at,
She gave a good
Not
presentation.
Open cup back in the kitchen.
He's attached to the forest.
Okay. What's his name? Oh,
They're
thank
trying
you.
to drag back
Oh,
his
you're-
name, I used to work with him.
Yeah.
And he told me he
Coordination
did
with
this
that.
whole research project on this, and he
Yeah.
pretty much showed these
Oh, yeah.
maps of where are the salmon.
I
went.
love being in the
Yeah.
middle
So they
of it.
fertilize the trees.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But talking about the beavers, there was, I watch all the nature shows. You have to take the cows out first, because when they trample the girl in
Yeah.
that ring,
I think
Yeah.
so.
so they, and farmers were willing to do that, to